Welcome everybody. My name is Zahia Al-Masri and I will be moderating this event. I would like to first begin by acknowledging the land that we are on. We are located on unceded indigenous lands. The Kanyen Keha Ka Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Tiotaque, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. And we thank you for the hospitality that you have given us. Thank you everybody for attending this webinar with us today. Labor for Palestine is actually a pan-Canadian network of labor activists who work to deepen solidarity with Palestinian workers and people in their struggle for liberation. One of the main reasons that we are meeting here today is to come in support of Palestinian workers who, in addition to suffering the ongoing Nakba, the ongoing oppression and occupation of the Israeli state, and in addition to suffering the 13 years of an illegal blockade on the Palestinian people of Gaza, are going through this huge pandemic that we are all suffering from across the world, that is COVID-19. So Labor for Palestine has teamed up with many unions, including the Palestine New Federation of Trade Unions, the Palestinian Postal Service Workers Union, General Union of Daycare and Private School Employees, Human Rights Defenders, and the Land Defense Coalition. They have teamed up with these unions in order to come and support those Palestinian workers who are struggling to make ends meet, who are struggling to continue day by day in order just to be able to survive. So what we're doing, what we are hoping for is that so far the fundraiser's aim is $40,000. And we have raised quite a bit of that amount, but we are hoping for more. This is a case where everybody can contribute from their own living room and can in support of those Palestinian workers. We have a lot of familiar faces with us here today, which I'm going to introduce. But just to give you an idea of what the workers are going through, because you know a lot of Palestinian workers count on working inside of Israel. Well, one of those workers was actually thrown a month ago. He was thrown because he showed symptoms of COVID-19. So he has physically removed and thrown at the borders without having access to any healthcare, without having access to any treatment. So these are some of the inhuman situations that Palestinians, in addition to everything that they are going through, Palestinian workers have to deal with on a daily basis. This is why it's very important to support the work of Labor for Palestine, which really aims at deepening the solidarity between Canadians here and all over and Palestinians. So those familiar faces that we have with us today, I'm going to introduce them one by one and then they'll be able to speak. We have Samia Al-Botmeh, who's a wonderful activist, an amazing, strong woman who's been here to Montreal, and she came to Concordia University and we actually shared a panel as well together. She's an assistant professor in labor economics and the dean of the faculty of business and economics at Birzeit University in Palestine. Welcome, Samia. And we also have with us a dear friend of mine, Jamal.
Thank you, Zahia.
He's the executive committee member of the Palestine New Federation of Trade Unions and Secretariat member of the Boycott National Committee, the BNC. He's a longtime activist as well, and he's obviously one of the founders of Stop the Wall as well. And he's been here during the World Social Forum in 2016, and he presented at one of the Grandes Conférences. Welcome, Jamal.
Thank you, Zahia. Thank you. Thank you all.
And we also have with us Abbas Milhem, who's also a long-time activist and who worked very closely on the ground with all civil society members and including issues that touch upon women and that touch upon organization and mobilization. He's also the executive director of Palestinian Farmers Union's PFU, and we hope to welcome him soon in Montreal. Alors, je voulais vraiment souhaiter la bienvenue à tout le monde. Puis comme vous le savez,
So I really want to wish a warm welcome to everyone. As you know, we have an interpreter live today. So I imagine you have already chosen your preferred language.
There will be a question and answer period towards the end. So I will ask you to please send in your questions and point out to which speaker you are directing your questions. And for now, I'd like to turn it over to Samia, and she will share her presentation with us. Samia.
Hello, everybody. It's evening time here, but I understand it's midday, your end. I mean, these times are very difficult. We've been under lockdown now for about 2 months, and it's the same for you. Again, laborers actually have been particularly hit by this latest pandemic. What I will be talking about is it's a bit of a structured presentation on the broad political economy of the labor market in Palestine. And then Jamal and Abbas, as I understand, will follow on by talking specifically about the conditions of the laborers and what has been happening during the current pandemic. So I'll share my presentation at the moment. In a second, okay. Just a second. Okay, here it is. I hope it's visible to everybody. So I'm going to talk about the labor markets in Palestine, and basically how colonialism has generated an economy which is actually it's a typical economy of a colonized population, in the sense that Israel has worked over the years to devise an economy that can serve its purposes, Israel's purposes, Israel's interests. And that has actually become very obvious with the current pandemic, and how this pandemic disadvantaged the workers as a result of the structure of the labor market. This is just a very general view of the Palestinian economy. This is the gross domestic product of the Palestinian economy. It's a very a fluctuating curve, as you can see, and this is a very, we call it the yo-yo curve, because it increases, decreases. No other economy in the world would have such a curve. GDP, gross domestic product, increases by 15% and declines by 10%, and so on. And this is a reflection, basically, of the impact of colonialism, of Israel's destruction of the economy, the Intifada, the wars on Gaza, the compression of the economy as a whole. Again, the fragmentation of the land in terms of Israel breaking down the West Bank into Area A, Area B, Area C, where labor faces actually different opportunities and different circumstances in these three areas. There are three different realities within a very limited geographical sphere. Israel remains, of course, in control of the borders of the West Bank and Gaza, that remain to be separate from each other. Controlling the borders has significant economic impact. This means that the Palestinians can't import or export freely. Taxes collected at the borders are subject to Israel's control. This has implications for investment, has implications for production, and so on and so forth. So this reality of fragmentation has a severe impact on workers and the labor market by fragmenting the reality of the workers, be it in Area A, B, and C, be it in the West Bank and Gaza, again, workers in Israel. So they have to, in a way, maneuver between different worlds in one day, crossing into Israel, coming back to the West Bank, moving from Area A to Area B to Area C. All of these conditions actually are extremely difficult to maneuver through. Having the settlements, the wall, the bypass roads, the checkpoints, again, complicates reality for life in general, but for labor in particular. In terms of the political economy of labor in Palestine, how colonialism worked to destroy the labor market is basically through focusing on production. Israel worked as all colonialists. This has happened in South Africa. It has happened in the classical case of colonialism, British and French colonialism across the developing world. Focus on destroying production. That's what colonialists do. Because production is not just an economic activity, it's a social political activity. And as a result, Israel, confiscated land, took out water, prevented Palestinians from harvesting water, and so on and so forth. As a result, at the moment, agriculture, for example, that used to contribute nearly 34% of the economy now contributes only 3%. The same with manufacturing that now contributes only 13% of the economy. And this is a highly targeted policy by Israel aimed at destroying not just the Palestinian economy, but also the Palestinian society, given the importance of production. Now, as a result of targeting the Palestinian economy and as a result of continuously destroying this economy, either through destroying production or even through restricting Palestinians from imports, from exports, from investment, from access to natural resources, be it water or land or other resources, we have had very high unemployment rates. In the Gaza Strip, we have the highest unemployment rates in the world, actually. You can see also the difference between men and women's unemployment rates. Women's unemployment rates are higher and increasing over time, while Palestinian women have the highest educational rates in the region. And
Samia, sorry,
yes?
Can you just repeat, because the line was cut for a second there. Can you just repeat?
Okay. I was just saying that am I too fast for the interpreter?
No, so far so good.
It's fine. Okay, what I just said is basically that unemployment rates for women are much higher than men. Mm-hmm. And this is particularly not odd. I mean, it has its reasons that women's educational rates are much higher than men, and their unemployment rates are higher and increasing. And you can see men's unemployment rates are stabilizing, while women's are increasing in a very sort of speedy trend. And this is, I mean, at the first glance, one can say it's paradoxical, but it does have its reasons that to do with the structure of the economy and structure of the labor market in particular. Now, the structure of the economy, which very much explains the vulnerability of the labor market and the situation of laborers, is highly skewed in favor of the services sector. So employment in Palestine, West Bank and Gaza is basically more than 62% of laborers, workers are in the services sector. This includes education and health, but it also includes retail trade, it includes workers in restaurants, hotels, and so on. All of these are considered services sector. Agriculture only employs 7% of workers, manufacturing 14%, construction 17%. So, and you can see over time, employment in agriculture is also declining, which is highly, highly problematic. I just want to talk a bit about workers in Israel, the fragmented reality of Palestinian laborers. Up until early this year, there were around 130,000 Palestinian workers working in the Israeli labor market. They represent 13% of workers, of Palestinian workers. However, they earn 2.2% of the average wage of Palestinians in West Bank and Gaza. And this is the average wage. This includes university professors, doctors, as well as peddlers, and so on. So you can see that wages for Palestinian workers in Israel are higher than the West Bank. And this is what pushes Palestinian workers, in addition to the very high unemployment rate, what pushes Palestinian workers to work in Israel. Yet, the reality of these workers is highly problematic. 98% of these workers are men. They earn 25% of the wage bill of workers in the Palestinian territories. 62 of them work in the construction sector. So the vast majority of them are either in construction or agriculture. We have something that we call the broker's tax. So these workers have to pay brokers for their permits. And these brokers actually take a huge chunk of the wage bill of Palestinian workers. These Palestinian workers do not have, the vast majority of them do not have any contracts. They are paid in cash, so they have no rights or benefits. And the brokers who take a percentage of their pay actually leave very little for these workers. So although they're paid higher than the wage bill in the West Bank, and of course there are no workers coming from the Gaza Strip, these payments are deducted by brokers who basically take part of these payments in order to allow Palestinian workers to work in the Israeli labor market. This is the reality that Palestinian workers live under. It's a reality of fragmented labor markets, a highly vulnerable labor market, a labor market that basically undergoes a lot of exploitation by Israel. Israel does not grant Palestinian workers any rights. It violates their rights and so on. So this is the reality. It's a highly colonial reality in a way. If we would have looked at, I don't know, the labor market in India under British colonialism, the black South African labor market under apartheid, wouldn't have looked very different. It's highly typical. Now, this reality has been compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
And I mean, the losses to the Palestinian economy are huge. It's a small economy. I mean, in perspective, our economy is $16 billion economy. It's really the size of a large company. But that's the size of the Palestinian economy. Losses to GDP are quite large, 15%. Losses to employment are huge. There are unemployment jumped by 50%. And this unemployment has been concentrated, of course, in the most vulnerable segments of laborers. So you have the educational sector, the health care sector, not affected by the pandemic because the government and universities, schools are ongoing. But the sectors that have been affected are workers, daily workers, taxi drivers, peddlers, informal sector workers. And these informal sector workers, they constitute more than 50% of the labor market. So these people have no...
Some of the most vulnerable sectors are the most affected.
Of course, yes, they are. And in a way, there isn't a safety net for these workers. The Palestinian Authority did impose a lockdown, and that helped a lot. If you see the numbers of infections in Palestine, we have had on 626 cases in the West Bank and Gaza, including Jerusalem. And there are 386 in the West Bank, 61 in Gaza, 179 disproportionately high in Jerusalem, as you can see. And these are not the cases in Jerusalem, are those reported by people. So because there is no way for the Palestinians to access proper records there. So people who inform the PA of the numbers of the infected. So, and there are 5 death cases in the West Bank and Gaza Strip and Jerusalem. But these figures in a way are, you know, it's like 0.3 cases for every 100,000 individuals. In Canada at the moment, you have 19 cases for every 100,000 individuals. These are BBC figures, and in the US there are 32 people for every 100,000 individuals.
We do have higher rates, yes.
So it is higher everywhere else, but for Palestinian workers, there is no safety net in a way, and people had just to lost, of course, their jobs, their work. You know, they're paid on daily basis. If you go out to work, you're paid. If you don't go out to work, you do not earn. And that's what has happened to more than 50% of the laborers in Palestine.
And
no
Samia,
income whatsoever.
It's still applicable where Palestinian workers still have to obtain a permit in order to go and work, right?
In order to go and work in Israel, of course,
yes.
You have to obtain a permit. And I think Jamal will speak about this reality, but it has been highly contentious. Highly contentious issue of Palestinian workers crossing into Israel. And initially the PA had agreed to with Israel that Palestinians will cross into Israel and remain. But of course, Israel, being its colonial self, did not provide any accommodation or so on. So these workers wanted to return to the West Bank. Now, returning to the West Bank, where the cases are much less than in Israel, the infections, meant that these Palestinian laborers had to be quarantined, and we do not really have so much resources. Then Palestinian laborers, Israel tried to actually encourage Palestinian workers to return on daily basis. Israel doesn't care, and actually it opened gaps in the wall
so that they will be able to cross.
Exactly. And some Palestinian laborers did cross, and that actually brought back infections because in a way most of the post-March cases, actually the source of the infections, laborers working in Israel. So in a way, Israel so that it can utilize Palestinian workers, doesn't care about their well-being, did not even, as you explained earlier on, Zahia, it actually, we use the term dumped Palestinian workers, a number of them at checkpoints, once they are suspected even of having, I mean, they dumped a few workers. One of them turned out to be, you know, didn't even have, was sick otherwise, and but didn't even bother checking these workers.
So like you are saying, the effects of colonialism are trickling down into each of the layers of the impact of colonialism on the daily lives of people, and adding to it is this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And particularly with the numbers that you are bringing up, Samia, the direct impact, economically speaking, on workers and the vulnerability of their situation. And it's extremely dangerous. The working conditions that they're in right now is extremely dangerous. And it's adding another layer of difficulty for them to have their rights recognized. And I think what we're going to hear later on between Jamal, when he's going to start describing to us the actual face, put a human face on those workers who are trying to cross, and trying to give us the more humane story of those workers as well. So I would like to thank you so much, Samia, and we'll have a chance to elaborate more on it during the question and answer period.
Thank you, Zahia.
Thank you. And before going to Jamal, I just would like to also thank and mention the contribution of CISO with us today. They have contributed for providing the Secretariat in French. So this is extremely important. And I would also like to let you know that the campaign, the fundraising campaign's deadline is May 31st. But in order for us here in Quebec, so we can be able also to contribute, and in order for labor union here and the local offices of labor unions here to be able to contribute and be part of this campaign, Labor for Palestine has extended this campaign for 5 more days. Puis au Québec, on est reconnu pour notre solidarité avec le peuple palestinien.
So in Quebec, we are known for solidarity work with the Palestinian people. So this is really a call out so that you can mobilize your local community and your work field for the workers of Palestine.
So before moving on also to Jamal, I would like to reiterate my thank you to Samia for bringing up those numbers. And Jamal, I would like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Zahia. Thank you very much. And I'm really happy to see you after this long years, you know.
Likewise, likewise.
Thank you. Thank you also for Labor for Palestine. Thank you all comrades for being in solidarity with Palestine, and particularly the workers in this very difficult situation. You know, and you are following up very well about the annexation plan that Israel will start soon, on the 1st of July. And this will leave, and we don't know what the situation is going to be. Anyway, it's now escalating. And after the Palestinian Authority canceled the agreements with Israel and started Israel even this harassment to the Palestinian Authority, we don't know what other measures that they would take after that. If there is still remain time, we can talk more about this in that. And thank you, Samia, because you talk a lot about the workers, and this is save time for talking about other issues that I am really was preparing. You know that from the beginning, the Palestinian Authority was one of the first close to make the lockdown on the Palestinian areas. And this has been for a simple reason, which is that the Palestinian Authority don't have the capacity to face a wide pandemic situation that might be in the Palestinian areas. Workers, as you know, is the most vulnerable for this. When we talk about workers, we are talking about 2 kinds of workers, in fact. The workers in Israel, we are talking about around 135,000 workers or 30,000 workers in Israel. And this is, they have their own certain conditions that Samia was talking about in details. Maybe you can talk about the situation after that, because this is create a kind of a confusion with Israel, and Israel was taking a very unhuman measures against the Palestinian workers and against the Palestinians in general. We are talking about some kind of $15 million a month that this is generating to the Palestinian economy every month. And when you talk about numbers, we talk about very small place, very small number of population. I talk about 4 million people. So the numbers is meaning, it has a big meaning when you talk about this. The other part of the workers that we are talking about is the Palestinian workers in the Palestinian areas. We are talking about 424,000 workers working in some 152 businesses in the West Bank. After the lockdown, only 37,000 of these continue working, which is mainly some services, supermarkets, some small businesses. That means that around 250 workers, they became unemployed. What the workers that remain working in is 105 workers that remain in their work. Unfortunately, these workers that we are talking about, the Palestinian Authority were incapable in any way to compensate or to take care of them. So it ended in a crisis for this workers. And you know, after that, there was trying to do many solutions. Part of it is the fund that has been created by businesses, by the authority, which Palestinian businessmen can contribute to. But unfortunately, this was a big failure, in fact. And then it didn't reach really to the workers that's supposed to be reached, or at least to the small number of them. So the crisis of the workers continued. Nowadays, they've started to get back to their work after the Palestinian Authority opened totally. They gave up, in fact. They just like let everything go back the same without even a plan to go step by step. So we don't know how the situation will end up after that. By this, the unemployment rate raised up to around 40%. The Palestinians, particularly in the West Bank. For the workers in Israel, from the early beginning, Israel had an equation. Of course, they want to keep their economy running, and the best way to do that is the Palestinian workers. They don't care about the Palestinian workers, what will happen to them. So by this, with the lockdown of the Palestinian Authority, the Israelis started open, as Samia mentioned, the gates of the walls without any security there. Like in the normal cases, anybody come close, they will shoot him. But they opened 56 opens in the wall, all along the wall, to allow the workers in the mountains to smuggle through this to go to the work in Israel. And when we talk about the statistics that Samia was mentioned about the cases, number of the cases in Palestine, 90% of these cases came from Israel. Even those who died, they have been infected by their sons or their parents who was working inside Israel to bring it to their family. So at the beginning, this is creating a crisis for the Palestinian Authority and crisis for also Israel, like in this context. So they became, after that, almost after a month, they get to an agreement that even the workers have two choices at that. And this was pressuring on the Palestinian Authority, either to stay in their work, in their home, and lose their work, or to go to Israel and risk their being infected by them. So they have no choices. So out of these workers, around 30,000 workers, they were decided to go back to work. And this has been, in a way, coordinated to have a kind of a security or a kind of measures, like anywhere they make the Palestinian workers their safe. But going, and this is part of the things that in the new union we're doing. They did that so to go to these crossing areas to see how they treated the workers. In fact, the treat was more humiliating even. They didn't have anything to do with helping the workers to take care of themselves. Not giving them masks, we know that might protect the workers from that. So we tried, after one day, we tried to go to the crossing in the early morning and trying to provide workers that time with gloves, with instructions at least, how they will take care of themselves. What has been come out, in fact, is a disaster. Can you imagine in this situation where they're supposed to protect the workers? They put an average of 22 workers in one room without in very bad conditions for living. Some of abandoned buildings or under construction, or even in the greenhouses. So it was one of the most racist things that we know about what the Israelis doing in the middle of this pandemic. And as Samia mentioned also, when they have any doubt that he has the symptoms, they will just throw him, sorry for this word, like the garbage right after across the checkpoint and throw him on the roadside, on the side of the road. And this has been repeated, the stories that comes with workers from there, and when they come and we just talk to them, it is a disaster how they deal with them, in spite of they are bringing them there to keep their economy running. And they're supposed to be thankful for them. Even they deal with them as like a kind of a suspect, somebody that you have to keep very distance from, and didn't even give him the very basic tools to protect themselves from the pandemics. And most of the workers, by the way, they get the disease, or those who get the disease, they get it from the Israeli employers. And there's a cases about this that happened. So the crisis will continue. But the other thing that they will do against the workers as a punishment, all those workers that they didn't go to Israel, they choose to stay at their homes, they have been punishing them by firing them from their work, canceling their permissions, and also on all their what they have to get from their rights from the work. They do also tell them that you don't have any rights. This is in a way to pressure them to come to the work. But anyway, it was a tool and a way for the Israeli employers just to get rid of any expenses that they have to give to the Palestinians as a rewards or the rights that they should have from them.
So Jamal, basically they were working without any guaranteed rights.
Any guaranteed rights at all, and even they use the pandemic to take out any rights that they have because they said that they don't want to come to work. Okay, you don't come to work, they don't have any rights anymore with us. And in fact, we had cases that we have been raised against some of the companies inside Israel, and we were able to get to some 80 workers about 425,000 shekels in the last time. So the other part of the story also, which is like the Palestinian Authority and how they deal with these workers. Other than they deal with them as a suspects, and this has been even, and unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that, like it has been created a kind of fear from the people towards the workers, because it became the disease. The disease come with these workers. So this is like they are bringing the corona. So it became like a discriminatory against the Palestinian workers. From the other point of view, also how the Palestinian Authority dealt with. They consider them that they are taking a very high wages, and these workers, they are in much better privilege than others in Palestine. So they didn't consider them as somebody who had been affected and who's supposed to be like taken care of and or have been compensated in way or another.
And Jamal, just to clarify, the workers you're talking about, we're talking West Bank, Gaza, and inside Israel as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even Gaza is worse than that, by the way, worse than the West Bank. It's like because they had total closure on Gaza, and the Israelis against it is like if the whole pandemic is coming from Gaza, and Gaza don't have any cases, in fact. But also they had been using it also on a much more pressure on Gaza in this case.
Okay.
So this is mainly the main points that I can talk about. In fact, I'm just as I told you, many things I was going to talk about. Samia was mentioning. So if there is any questions, anything to be clarified within discussion, I'm ready.
Okay.
Lastly, for the political situation, by the way, and this is this is very important to take into consideration when they are talking about what to do. In fact, we have to expect that we are coming to a very bad situation in Palestine. It could be a wide confrontation. Israel is going to squeeze us to the end economically. So it's already there is a kind of like boiling the situation here. People end up confused, they don't know what's going on. So
understandably, though,
today Israel killed 2 people, by the way. Today, and this has been increasing how they deal with the Palestinians, with more humiliation on the checkpoints and in the roads. Like every Palestinian passing through soldiers or settlers feel that his life is threatened. But this is in a way or another would lead to a wider confrontation that could be here, and we get back to a real need for a real solidarity with the Palestinian people and with workers as well.
Absolutely. Well, Jamal, maybe you can just add a bit because we are following what's happening in Palestine, and I saw pictures of you and Salah Khawaja. And with what you mentioned, you are going, you are
Yes.
monitoring, and you are giving out help to workers in terms of masks, in terms of gloves, in terms of all sanitary support. And is there a wider movement in order to come and support to those workers who don't have access to these?
In fact, from the beginning of the lockdown that the Palestinian Authority did, they did the lockdown on the Palestinians area A and on area B. But what about, there is 225 Palestinian communities in area C. They had been left to the under the Israeli mercy. At the same time, where Israel used the pandemic and the whole world busy with the pandemic, and they start accelerating their attack on the Palestinians. More destruction, seizing land, burning the Palestinian fields, didn't allow them to go out, building more 14 new outpost settlements that has been built in this last 2 months. And they meant to do it on the top of the Palestinian communities, particularly the Bedouins, not to allow them to move anywhere and to keep stuck in their tents. So we start.
Well, the news are silent on those 14 illegal outposts.
Nobody talk about it. So we start from the beginning, going to these communities, and it was not easy. We have been using even the Palestinian Authority cars, and we go to these communities. First, we want to relax them, to tell them what's going on, and to tell them what to do, instructions, what they can do if there is anything happen to them. Also, we bring with us some of the things that they can, like the hygiene, like the gloves, like the masks, these things that they can help them. And we create a very good impact on these people. People, when they saw us, they were really relieved. They don't know, they are isolated. They don't know what, nobody care of them. Israel is attacking them, and they left alone in this huge area. In fact, it was beyond our capacity also. What we have been able to reach is around 130 communities out of 255. But we, from community to another, we try to send the message out, to send the addresses, how they can do on this issue. And of course, major part of these people, particularly in Jordan Valley, are working in agriculture. And this is maybe my friend, Comrade Abbas, maybe he will talk about more about how this has been affected. Now we started, and this is but already we start the second phase of this emergency, which is now what after. We have been locked down for 2 months, but this has been huge impact on the Palestinian workers and the Palestinian community, especially the isolated one. So we started to go on again there and trying to give them the main steadfastness, solidarity. We don't solidarity with each other, but any action that can make them. Especially now, we need a special focus on that area because this is targeted to be annexed. And the news that has been released from the Israelis is horrible. It's unbelievable how they are thinking. For preliminary information, they are talking about this is their news, which is our calculations also given much more. But they are talking about 43 villages with 106,000 Palestinians going to be in this annexed area. Nobody knows. Annexed area, that doesn't mean that they will annex them to Israel and they give them the Israeli IDs. This will remain a blocks in the middle of isolated area that restricted everything, services, movement, everything in this area. So at least our main initial studies that we were doing, we create a new map. I will share it with you later.
Yes, please do.
We have over 60, in fact, communities that are under targeted of really ethnic cleansing policies. And it seems Israel is going, no matter what anybody will say, what the whole world is saying. Even Trump, if he get back from his decision, they will do it. Here, there is a craziness and there's madness, much more chauvinist and racist ideology here. They feel that this is the right time to continue the ethnically cleansing of Palestine.
Thank you so much, Jamal. I think we'll get more to those issues, I think, during the question and answer period. But one of the things that you highlighted, I think, is that during the COVID-19 crisis, each country is dealing with the main issues regarding the COVID-19, workers' rights, trying to give subsidies to small shops, small businesses who lost their wages, who lost their income, just dealing with the basics. Yet with Palestinians, it's one layer over the other. The annexation is still ongoing. We have still building of illegal outposts that is still ongoing. The Nakba is still ongoing. The day-to-day issues, they're like, you know, stuck between a rock and a hard place. And these are the faces of workers every day. This is
But
what
you
they're
know,
suffering through.
some other thing that people don't talk about, you know what they are doing in the Jordan Valley now, especially now, we you know, it's like summer, very high degrees. They are burning the wheat of the people. It's just in 1 week, there are over 20,000 dunams of wheat that has been burned, and over 100,000 over 10,000 dunams of grazing area for the animals. So in fact, the crimes that they are doing in that area, like nobody talk about, but it's like it is crimes against humanity.
Thank you, Jamal. And we will get back to these points because we need, I mean, this is another main reason that these webinars are being held. And you have to stay tuned and follow Labor for Palestine, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter, just to see more webinars on these topics in order to strengthen and deepen the solidarity and these ties between Canada and Palestine, because they do exist. We just have to strengthen them and to see our actions here, what the direct impact and positive consequences are on the ground there. Thank you so much, Jamal. And I'll come back to you during the question and answer period.
Thank you, Zain.
And now I'm going to turn to Abbas, and we are going to hear exactly, I mean, what's interesting here is that not only are we getting numbers and getting facts of what's happening on the ground, we are putting a humane face on the lives of these workers and the direct impact that it has on their daily lives and their family, because it does have an impact on the fabric of the Palestinian society. I mean, we know here in Canada, we have been confined for 2 months, but we have the resources the government is providing. It's questionable, we can still do better, but still we have a safety net. And from what I've heard so far is that we're not seeing that safety net in Palestine. Abbas, I turn it over to you to talk to us more about this, please. مش عم نسمعك.
I was muted, sorry.
Perfect, now we can hear you, thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Zahiya. Thanks for Samia and Jamal. I think they have shed the light widely on the workers' difficulties, challenges, apartheid that they are being imposed to due to the occupation and the work conditions, whether inside Israel or in Palestine. From my part, I would focus more on the struggle around land and why, which will explain all the practices Israeli occupation is doing, and the killings, the restrictions they impose, the house demolitions, and all the practices Israel is doing is with one aim: to control the land. And why they want to control the land. And in order to understand this, I think we need to understand clearly the division of land in Palestine following the signing of the so-called peace agreement in 1994, which gave the right for the Israeli occupation to categorize the Palestinian land into 3 categories: Area A and Area B and Area C. I think you know these 3 categories, where Area A would be under the full control of the Palestinian Authority, the one established following the Oslo Agreement in 1994. Area B would be shared between Israelis and Palestinians, where security responsibilities was given to the Israeli occupation in Area B, while administrative and management of daily lives of Palestinians was given to the Palestinian Authority. However, the most important part, the most important category of this division was Area C. Area C was given entirely under the control of the Israeli occupation from security, management, and administrative point of view. And when we say Area C, we mean 61% of the entire West Bank areas that was occupied in 1967. When we say Area C, it is the area that is rich with natural resources, where we have the fertile soil needed for agriculture, and agriculture in a country like Palestine is unique and very important, where tens of thousands of families and workers live partially or entirely on the production and practicing of farming and agriculture. This entire area, 61%, have been given under the full control of the Israelis. And it's most empty and controlled where Israel put that area as a target for settlement expansion, and put control over all natural resources in that area with one aim, trying to emptify that land from farmers and those who work and live from farming, in order to leave the land empty and easy hunt for confiscation and expansion. And to understand the history of this struggle around land, if we go back till before even 1947, when Palestine was Palestine and only under the mandate, British mandate, but still was for Palestinians, owned by Palestinians, managed and administered by Palestinians, there were no Israeli state at that time. When due the partition of Palestine, the UN resolution partition of Palestine in 1947, that gave the Jews to establish a state on 55%, leaving 45% of the land for Palestinians at that time, for Arabs, denying and depriving the right of Palestinians to get, access to a larger part of fertile soil and even the sea, shore, and those, natural resources at that time. The partition of Palestine resolution was rejected by Arabs at that time, and did not stop the Israeli greedy to expand the control of the land more and more. And instead of establishing a state on 55% of the land, they continued to eat up the land, bit by bit, until they had the control over 78% of the land by 1967. Before 1967, Israel was established, and controlling almost 78% of the land. This land shrinking, leaving and kicking out tens of thousands of Palestinians who are living in agriculture, and tens of thousands of workers who work in farming and agriculture, which was the only source of making living for almost most of them.
And this is a key figure here.
Absolutely. Even in 1967, which was the second Nakba for all Palestinians, Israel in the Second War occupied the remain part of West Bank, and now we in Palestine live under a full occupation that controlling every single aspect of our life. This did not stop. This continued until 1994, when we had this Oslo agreement, with the attempt from the Palestinian side and international community to reach up a peace agreement with Israel and end up this conflict once and forever. But Israel has always the same plan since 1947 until now. They want the entire land empty from people. So they never stopped their plans, and they continued even after we signed the Oslo agreement with them, the peace agreement in 1994. By the way, the number of settlements that have been established after signing the peace agreement with Israel was almost 10 times than the number of settlements that were established from 1967 until 1994.
So the number keeps on growing.
Of course, Israel needed to gain some time and needed to rest and relax from the international pressure on them. That's why they accepted to sign a peace agreement in 1994. And the whole world felt relaxed because they have seen Mr. Arafat at that time and the Prime Minister Rabin shaking hands in Oslo, and they all felt that peace is there, peace is prevailing, and Israel is accepting peace, and khalas, this conflict will be ended once and forever. Why the
an empty symbolic gesture.
The plans continued as they are. Israel continued to expand. Israel continued to impose restrictions on access to fertile soil in the land categorized under Area C, and imposed restrictions on Palestinians from getting access to their natural resources. And as a farmer, if we have no land, if we have no access to land as a farmer and no access to water resources, then agriculture would be challenging and no one can practice farming. And this was the aim. They wanted to make farming and agriculture for farmers as impossible, in order to force farmers to leave their land empty, and then it become easy hunt for confiscations and for annexation. And even for those farmers who resisted and insisted to stay on their land, struggle and fight the daily attacks of settlers, the daily attacks of the army, the military zones they have established in that area, our farmers, they encountered demolitions and destructions of their agricultural projects, destruction of their irrigation networks that they managed to establish there, demolishing of their water resources that were there even before the occupation was established. Some of their water resources were in Palestine even before the Nakba. Before the Nakba, these water resources were completely destroyed by the Israeli settlers and by the Israeli occupying power on the ground, because I mean the main struggle for them was they want the land empty. This described the annexation plan that is now undergoing in Area C. Now the current plans, Israel wants to announce by 1st of July the annexation of 30% of the entire area C, and they will start up by annexing Jordan Valley.
Abbas, you mentioned 30%.
Now they will start with the 30% of area C, which is Jordan Valley. Why Jordan Valley?
Can I ask you just to speak up a little bit?
Sorry,
yeah.
I mean the annexation, the Israeli plans for annexation will go into 2 phases. They will start the plans starting from July 1st and then on. But the first phase would be imposing control and annexation of the entire Jordan Valley. Jordan Valley by itself forms like 30% of Palestinian land occupied in 1967. It is the richest area with the fertile soil for agriculture and for farming and for farmers. It is the area where most of the natural resources, mainly water resources, are existing. So Israel will start the annexation of this land in Jordan Valley. In order to do so, they started even during the COVID-19 outbreak here in Palestine, where when our government imposed, restriction on movement for 80 days, by the way, my friend Jamal, not only 2 months, it was 80 days emergency situation, and due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Israeli army benefited from the emergency situation by continuing imposing their annexation plans on the ground. One of them was, as my colleague Jamal mentioned, kicking out all ruminants and forbid them to graze in the grazing area in Jordan Valley. Second, burning out their even crops in Area C, like what Jamal mentioned when they burned out the wheat crops in that area. Third, they released wild animals in Area C, wolves that attacked even cattle, sheep, and cows, and killed many of the cattle, of cattle heads, sheep and cows in Jordan Valley. Wolves, can you imagine? We don't have wolves in Palestine.
So attacking the basic livelihood of Palestinian farmers.
Not only this, but terrifying farmers from entering these areas by, because, life is life, people will fear. And, wolves are wild and they attack. So people will feel, frightened on their families, their children, their safety and their everything. The aim of all these practices, in addition to the demolishing of houses, shelters for Bedouins, and this destruction of agricultural projects there, the aim of all these practices that was rapidly increased in the last 80 days during the outbreak of COVID-19 and the emergency situation is they want to implement the annexation plan on an empty land. Their aim, they want the land empty from people, and they will kick out even all farmers from that area. But to do so, access to this area is now completely restricted by the Israeli army and settlers. They are occupying the area, they're using the land, and by the way, I'm talking about land owned by farmers, owned by those who work in these farmers and live from what they produce. And this is one side. From the other side, they try to attract these workers who used to work in their land and these families to go and work in settlements.
And this is where the knife cuts both ways, where
absolutely, from one side they destroy the farms, and from the other side they open settlements and allow some Palestinian workers to go and work the donkey work inside these settlements to grow up the agriculture and farming of settlers in that area. So,
and we are speaking about a form of collective punishment.
It is collective punishment. It's unhuman. It is, something no one can describe and imagine in modern history.
Mm-hmm.
This is the longest occupation that have been still existing in modern history. It is really an apartheid regime worse than the one we knew in South Africa, a few decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
This is with brutality, with, Jamal mentioned about 2 people were killed today. By the way, one of them was a person with disability in Jerusalem. A person with
May
disability.
they rest in peace.
He was sentenced to death in cold blood in Jerusalem. This is Israel. This is the occupying power we know and you hear about.
Mm-hmm.
This is the occupying power that describes itself as the only democratic, oasis in the Middle East area. This is the democracy we've seen and experienced from this state. It's not a state. It's a group of guerrilla people who live only on the bloods of other people. They're stealing, just to give you one example.
Yes.
The way, the incentives they provide to settlers to encourage them to steal more land from Jordan Valley. Any settler who accept to go and live in the settlement in Jordan Valley, the Israeli government deprive him from paying any cost for water needed to irrigate their agricultural projects.
So these costs are taken on by the state.
By the state, by the government itself. Incentives are given to those settlers by exempting them from paying any taxes. They receive allowances on their houses, so they get houses there at a very, very low cost compared to the cost of house inside Israel, like in Tel Aviv, Haifa, or wherever. And they give them, and this is ironic, support of resilience.
Because they are agreeing to go and live there.
Agreeing to go and live there.
This is outrageous. So as a Palestinian refugee, I am not allowed to go back to my homeland, but for a Russian or a Ukrainian Jewish person who wish to go back, they will get incentives, financial incentives. And this is documented, Abbas. This is information that's available.
It is
Sorry to interfere, Abbas, but they are giving $20,000 for each farmer that he wants to move to Jordan Valley.
Okay, and this number also, I just want to make sure that we have documented numbers.
Yeah, not only this, Zahia,
okay.
Not only this, even those settlers, they call themselves farmers in Jordan Valley, because they are occupying the entire area. They have land for free, confiscated from Palestinian farmers. They have water for free, confiscated from Palestinian farmers. Not only this, even those settler farmers, when they purchase agro inputs to produce, crops, they receive 37% reimbursement on any invoice they provide to the government. 20% of this 37% is support for resilience, and 17% they receive incentives in form of tax reimbursement. This is to encourage them to live there on the land owned by Palestinians and continue stealing the water owned by Palestinian farmers there.
And do we have any subsidies for Palestinian workers, for Palestinian agricultural workers?
Unfortunately, we don't have subsidies here in Palestine. That's why we in the Palestinian Farmers Union, we struggle hard to ensure that the existing agricultural policies are better responsive to farmers' rights and farmers' needs who suffer on daily basis from the daily and ongoing attacks made by the Israeli settlers or the Israeli army in that area. We managed so far to change some policies, amend others, and even suggested some policy reforms, and we're still fighting for some, indirect subsidies to be given to farmers living in Jordan Valley. We have called upon recently in the previous statement to the Prime Minister Office and the Council of Ministers to announce Jordan Valley as a cluster of resistance and a cluster of resilience. by
Talking about the Palestinian Authority, not the Israelis.
yeah, Palestinian Authority. Yes. Sorry. I'm talking about the internal struggle here, the national struggle with our national government. We called upon our government to announce Jordan Valley because it is under the threat of annexation in 1 month from now, or less than 1 month from now, to announce Jordan Valley as a cluster of resilience, which means all projects, all resources should be channelized to support farmers and those who work in agriculture and farming in that area as top priority.
And this is the importance, I think, Abbas, this is the importance, and Jamal and Samia, obviously, this is the importance of having organized labor unions in order to come in support of all workers, in order to voice their priorities and preoccupations. Abbas, I'm just going to take a minute to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and actions with us right now. And maybe I'll just take a couple of minutes to just bring the three of you, Jamal, Samia, and Abbas, brought forth so many important points and highlighted the daily, I mean, this is what we have to go back to. And the reason why we're all here today is to support Palestinian workers on the ground. And you just highlighted the daily problems that they have to go through. The picture that comes to mind is a pressure cooker. You know, Palestinians are already...
Sorry. I'm receiving messages, asking for this information. If you would like, I can share with you all the documents we have in the union about the information I provided, and you can disseminate the information.
Absolutely, yes.
The whole group, of course.
That's a good idea. We'll get to the question. I'm reading the questions as well, so we'll get to them. But just in order to sum up a bit, it's like I was saying, it's like a pressure cooker, basically. Palestinian workers and Palestinian families already were living under dire circumstances, and we added the COVID-19. Samia, you mentioned that there's absolutely no safety net for these workers. Jamal, you were talking about civil society initiatives in order to go and support these workers and provide them with basic needs. And Abbas, you are talking basically about a plea with the Palestinian Authority in order to come and support the ongoing annexation and the ongoing, pressure tactics and illegal tactics under the Fourth Geneva Convention. Collective punishment is deemed illegal, that are still being applied to Palestinians. So basically the COVID-19, if it's possible, brought out even a worse face of the ongoing occupation of Palestinians, and with a direct impact on workers who have no safety net. And this is why we're here today, in order to provide them with as much support as we can. And as all of you who are with us right now, all the attendees, you saw the link that has been posted for the GoFundMe page. Each one of us, from our own homes, own living rooms, we can go and contribute. And I just want to mention that we have with us also part of the attendees, Imad Tamiza, who came to visit us also. He's from Hebron, Khalil. He came to visit us also in Montreal, and he's part of the Postal Workers Union as well. And they are working on the ground, and he collaborates as well with Labor for Palestine in order to come and support those Palestinian workers. And this is why it's important for us to contribute and show our solidarity that goes beyond just this webinar, but that translates into concrete actions on the ground. So now we're going to turn to the question and answer period, and you are going to allow me to just go and scroll through those questions, because Jamal, Samia, and Abbas, you have a lot of questions that are coming your way, and we're just going to go through them just one by one. Just a second. On behalf, you have a lot of thank yous and a lot of acknowledgements, which is always great. So Samia, a lot of people are asking to get the PowerPoint, so it's possible if we can share that PowerPoint. And I would like to ask you to unmute Abbas, Jamal, and Samia, if you can unmute. Just a second. Okay, so we have a question here about permits. Just a second. Okay. So we have, can I just, while scrolling through the question, I have a question that also came over there. If Samia, if you can comment just a bit, because we know that the labor has always had a strong presence. Labor unions have always had a strong presence in Palestine. Okay, can you and Jamal and Abbas just speak a bit on what does it look like today, the presence of labor unions on the ground in terms of the support that they come to workers in Palestine?
I mean, there are several federations, trade union federations that encompass trade unions in Palestine. In a way, they have their problems. They mostly act to deal with the worker problems when they happen. So there is no anticipation of problems in order to resolve these for workers beforehand. In the current crisis, the COVID-19 crisis, the PGFTU, the General Federation of Palestinian Trade Unions, struck a deal with the private sector and the government. So it was a tripartite sort of agreement that they agreed with the private sector. These are for waged workers, of course. They should pay waged workers half of their salaries, half of their wages during the 2 months of April and May, and the rest of their wages once the crisis is over. A lot of private sector businesses didn't actually pay waged workers. So there was an issue with these workers who were considered privileged in a way, because there was this agreement around these workers, yet it didn't go through. Okay. This is for waged workers. For non-waged workers, there was they're not even identified, so they don't even exist on the map, and these are the majority of workers. Particularly in Area C, which is the most vulnerable politically. So
this is what we've been hearing from all three of you speakers, that Area C is the most vulnerable.
I mean, the population there it's not a highly concentrated population, but it is, of course, the most vulnerable because it's under attack, it's under daily attack. People's lives are at the edge every moment of their lives, their livelihoods, their houses. So they're really living at the edge, and this is why their lives are vulnerable. And now you're having this crisis added to everything else they are suffering from. Okay. Again, how Palestinians coped is through supporting each other mostly. So okay. if there is somebody whose wages remained intact for some reason, they're working in the government or they're working in the education sector or the health sector, etc., they're basically bailing each other out. So this wage bill gets distributed over a number of families. This is what has happened in the first Intifada, in the second Intifada. So our safety net is each other,
the community.
We support each other, but okay. People are at the end of their means, and that's what's dangerous at the moment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Samia. Jamal, I have a question here. What can we do in solidarity with workers in Palestine as unions, groups, individuals from other countries? How can we better inform internationally in a hostile context? So what can groups from the outside do?
Yeah.
And this question is coming from us, from France.
Yeah. And I think, you just like to continue a little bit on Samia, what she was saying. We are very frustrating from the position of the Palestinian main labor organization, which is the BGFT. The expectation could be much more than that. Especially they are the one, this is like totally ironic and problematic. They have the agreement with the Israeli Histadrut. And we are in BDS against totally, because it became formal normalization. But even in this situation, they didn't use their power even to support the Palestinian farmers as it should be, especially how they were treated in the Palestinian.
How do you see groups from the outside providing support to unions and the Palestinian workers movement within Palestine?
Yeah, I think what you are doing now, like a kind of you are distributing a kind of a call for support This is one of the main issues that you can do. I think one of the things that we were focusing on now is with this many families that they became really, really suffering, really in danger situation, lost their money, their resources, their income. They don't have, and they didn't, nobody gave them the support that should be needed. We need to support them in this coming few days until they recover back again. So what you are doing is one of these main things that I think you are doing well, and you should continue with this. The fundraising for the cases to support the Palestinian poor families and workers' families. The second thing is also extended the solidarity with the Palestinian workers by acting and strongly go on with boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. Particularly, you need to put international-wide pressure on the international labor organizations to finish with the Histadrut, because of the role that they are playing there in support of the colonization, occupation, and also for oppression for the Palestinian workers. This is one of the main support that you can do for the Palestinians. We need your political standing strongly behind them. It's one of the main things is just to advance your act for BDS on the Israeli main labor Histadrut, and also Israel in general as an apartheid colonization regime.
Okay, Abbas, I have a question for you, but I'm just going to follow through with Jamal because you mentioned it and there's a question related to it. What role is the Histadrut playing right now?
In fact, nothing. He stays silent in front of all what happened to the Palestinian workers inside Israel. How comes you accept that like 22 and in some cases 30 and 35 workers being in a room in a very bad situation in such kind of...
So it's the complicity in what's happening.
Exactly, they are explicit. Also, how the Israeli businessman has been used the corona to oppress the Palestinian workers, to fire them, to take over their allowances and all the rights that they have on there.
So taking advantage of the current situation in order to, just like you said, use Palestinian workers in order to get the job done without guaranteeing any of their rights.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. And Abbas, so the question that I have here, I'm just going to go in order. What are Israeli workers' organizations doing in solidarity with Palestinian workers?
Israeli organizations?
We have none to speak of.
Not, most of these organizations, they represent the workers in their, in their community. Actually, they don't defend the rights of Palestinians working inside Israel. On top of these organizations is the Histadrut, which my colleague Jamal just
talked about.
And
Absolutely.
this Histadrut, they pay no attention to the rights of Palestinian workers working inside Israel. And by the way, the work inside Israel is the donkey work that is being done and handled by the Palestinian workers. That's why Israel, even during the COVID-19 outbreak, they opened the gates, they opened the borders and gaps even in the wall to allow more and more workers to get inside Israel in order to do the donkey work. Usually Israeli Jewish workers, they don't do without rights. Zahia and colleagues, this occupation has lasted until now for one reason. It is like an 8-star type of occupation. They gain and pay no price for being occupiers. There is no price for occupiers being occupiers.
And this is maybe a call out. One of the things that they are asking, this is a call out to ask for Israel to be more accountable.
This is what I want to request, actually. And settlers who are encouraged and they received incentives to go and live as settlers there, they're paying no cost. On the other side, they're receiving incentives to become settlers. That's why the number of settlements and settlers is expanding in Palestine rapidly during the past few years, and now, and even it goes more fastly. What is required is to put this Israeli government accountable for being occupying power. There must be a price for being occupiers. And if there is a price for being occupiers, then they will count from 1 to 10 before they will commit any attack against Palestinians and their rights in this land. One of the things, for example, in terms of agriculture for settlers, 67 of agricultural produce from settlers in Palestine is exported to the international community.
This is an extremely important point because it joins Jamal's BDS campaign. So 67%
of the agricultural produce of settlers in West Bank is going to Europe, US, maybe in Canada. I don't have figures for Canada, but I have for Europe. You know, $32 billion, you know, the trading between Israel and Europe. So Israel is living on what they export outside. In order to pressure Israel as an occupying power, we can impose sanctions on this state as long as they occupy the other's land and as long as they encourage and give incentives to settlers and expanding the settlements there. When this annexation will happen in July, what will the international community do? What we expect from you, from trade, from unionists, from organization, is to pressure their government to impose pressure on Israel as an occupying power and to boycott any type of trading between this country and that country, to make Israel accountable and paying the price for being occupiers. This is the only thing that will make Israel retreat back from their plans of annexation.
And Abbas, we have already an example of what happened in South Africa against the apartheid regime. And Canada was at the forefront of this fight.
Yes.
So this is the kind of call out that we could ask for.
Absolutely, absolutely. The only thing that toppled down the apartheid regime in South Africa was the sanctions and the price that regime was paying to continue as an apartheid regime. This is what we expect from our friends around the whole world and solidarity groups, actually.
Zahia, small addition, if you
yes, please go ahead, Jamal.
You know, like, all the time when we ask people to boycott Israel, everybody will take no. We want to give a kind of chance for the negotiations, for talks, but Israel now is declaring it immediately. There is no agreements. We are going to annex the Palestinians. We will have one apartheid state from the river to the sea, and Palestinians will turn into an isolation in there. So we have all the reason now, that to call for this loudly and people to listen is not absolutely. It's not anymore that you can give any justification for just keep standing.
Allow me, Zahia, to jump in and add just a few sentences here, if you allow me.
A few
sentences. You know, and I know how sensitive it is for the international, community and state to boycott Israel. We need to distinguish between two things. There is a difference between Israel as a state and the occupying power. We want the sanction on the occupying power. We want to end up this occupation. When you impose sanctions on the occupation, you are not, delegitimizing Israel for some countries. We delegitimize the occupation because none of the countries we know around this world will give legitimacy for an occupation to continue and to still exist.
And Israel is
extremely important to highlight.
Absolutely. I know.
This is, and
make it easier for Germany.
And just because we are coming close to our finish line, I mean, we could go on to speak for hours on end, but what I'd like to do is just to give each one of you just a minute for just in closing what you'd like, because we have, we have so many participants with us. I'm trying to look at the number, but I lost track, and we want them to hear this call out. And on my end, I just want to remind everybody to click on the GoFundMe link and to follow Labor for Palestine on Facebook and Twitter in order for us to be able to act. And I implore you to reach out to your member of parliament, whichever country you reside in. Reach out to your member of parliament, to your local office of your local unions, the local syndicat that you are in, to reach out and try to pass motions, try to inform people about what's happening and the situation of workers in Palestine, particularly under the COVID-19. So Samia, as we started, I'd like to start with you. You have 1 minute just to let the people know of what it is that is happening right now in terms of closing.
Yes, I'd just like to thank everyone for their solidarity and basically reiterate what Jamal and Abbas and yourself, Zahia, has said. It is important to support Palestinian workers on the ground at the moment during this crisis, financially and so on. But our predicament is not economic. Our predicament is political. Hence, we need political solidarity, communicating with your members of parliament, fighting back. The attack on BDS is by spreading BDS even further, criminalizing BDS in the US, in Canada, across Europe. The best way to fight back is actually to engage more in BDS. And this is a legitimate mechanism to fight colonialism and end the occupation. So for us, it's important, and we're thankful for your solidarity and support, the immediate solidarity and support, but we want to work together to deconstruct colonialism. BDS is a mechanism that enables you to act no matter where you are. Israel and its allies around the world are trying to make it difficult for us to work, and by fighting back, by becoming even more active is the way forward. And thank you again for your questions, for your solidarity, and for this webinar for Labor for Palestine and all the attendees.
Thank you, Samia. Thank you. Jamal?
Yani what I can add to what Samia was saying, I'm totally agreeing with her in this call, is when we get solidarity with Palestine or with oppressed people, we get solidarity with our humanity. It's it's totally human issue, and it's our responsibility all for that. Even us as Palestinians, we have responsibility to get solidarity with the Black people that they are killed in the very savage way in the United States streets. The same with all the indigenous and what they are facing. So this is what brings us all together, and that's why we feel that it's a duty, it's a responsibility from all of us to stand together in the face of this new liberal aggressive policies and the right-wing fascist policies and regimes that they are controlling the world and threatening all the future of us as a people.
Thank you, Jamal.
We all, thank you. We all, under this umbrella of humanity, this is the only concept that, bring all us together under that one. And we all have principles and values. What we want from these groups, actually solidarity groups around the world, is working for the values and principles they believe in, which we are pretty much sure that these values and principles will be for the sake of fighting against occupation and standing with Palestinian basic rights. What we expect from you is two things, actually. Political pressure, which is very important, but this is in the long run. We in the union, we are now launching a huge campaign to encounter the annexation plan in Jordan Valley by encouraging agricultural projects and agricultural investment in Area C. And we want to send back all workers and farmers to go back to their land and resist there, insist there, establish their projects, whatever you can help us or donate to these kinds of projects and campaigns, that Absolutely. Will help, protect the land from being confiscated and make it difficult or even impossible for the Israeli occupation to annex or to confiscate. Thank you again, and hope you can do whatever you can to support the basic rights of all Palestinian farmers in this land. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abbas. Samia, Al-Botmeh, Jamal, Juma, Abbas, Milhem, thank you so much for sharing your stories, for sharing our stories from Palestine here with us, for bringing us a taste of Palestine to Montreal, to Canada, to wherever everybody is sharing this webinar with us. I would like to remind everybody who's here with us, the GoFundMe link is present here. Every action that you take in terms of spreading the knowledge, letting people know of what's happening in Palestine, letting people know of how workers' rights, basic workers' rights are being abused, neglected, and disrespected categorically by Israel, letting people know, going to your local labor, to your local syndicat, and providing this information in order for people to act. We have heard the voices from Palestine. There was a clear call out. There's the funding campaign that's ongoing. Please go and contribute to it. Please follow Labor for Palestine on Facebook and Twitter for more webinars to spread even more knowledge, because this is what we need. We need more knowledge. We need people to be more aware, and we need to raise awareness. So thank you so much, Labor for Palestine. Thank you for CISO for providing l'interprétariat. Pour les gens du Québec, il faut se rappeler la campagne, on l'a encore pour 5 jours.
For people of Quebec, the campaign is still on for 5 days. So please contribute in your own way and show your solidarity, because we can do it. We've done it before. Please, let's count on each other. And as we say here, it's gonna be okay, but we want it to be even better for Palestine.
Again, Samia, Jamal, Abbas, thank you so much. What time is it in Palestine right now?
9:30 p.m.
Oh, so the evening just started for all of you. And we will connect with you again in order to get more information. And I just want to let all the attendees know that the information that we had, that Jamal, Samia, and Abbas shared with us, we will be sharing that information with you in terms of documentation. I wish you all a good evening and solidarity. وبالعودة إن شاء الله.
Inshallah.
شكرا. Good evening.
Thank you. Shukran.